Everyone drinks coffee here? No, it does apply to tea. It does apply to tea in many ways. There's a few things we're talking about, like amazing coffee. We want a coffee that is what is always described as balanced. It's either balanced between sourness and bitterness, or there's no sourness and bitterness in it at all. And we be able to tell that it's well balanced if people aren't putting sugar in it or putting milk in it, doing anything to cut it. Bitterness I always perceive as something toxic, and your body registers as toxic. And anytime it's toxic, you add sugar. And that's an indication of a really poorly made cup of coffee. But what we want to do is go beyond that with our coffee that we're doing and making it with aromas and flavors, like, it's kind of like apricot and leather. You get forest berries there's downstairs, and you have a bunch of different flavors. And if you could actually make the coffee to perform where these kind of flavors are coming out, it's fantastic. How many people drink whiskey? Yeah, and it's really quite intense. You get all sorts of flavors in exploring, and if you make a cup of coffee, you get the same thing. You get the same thing in wine. That's why we do wine. We're getting all sorts of flavors in that. But the process of being able to make an amazing cup of coffee that performs like this takes a lot of love from where the farmers comes through, the millers, the roasters, which I do, and then the baristas take a lot of things. But through that, the biggest impact on how the performance of the quality of the coffee is the barista. And that's the guys downstairs. But if you're making coffee at home, you're the barista. And so it doesn't matter what quality of coffee that you buy or anything like that. If you don't know what you're kind of really doing, you don't know if you're going to be getting the maximum performance of that cup of coffee. So I wanted to give you a couple insights on how to improve your cup of coffee there. Mostly in terms of like buying and then storing it, different kind of grinding methods that you have available, and what you can actually do in terms of improving your own recipe. I know somebody gave me some tea and yesterday test, and it was really quite simple. That I followed the instructions explicitly on what the tea bag said and things like that. I'm like, right. Tested it. Bit of sturgeon, dry it to my mouth. I'm like, let me just change the recipe. Rewrote it, made it, and he's like, wow, that's loads better. It's really refreshing. Just a couple of characteristics, keys, fundamental changes, so you guys could even start making amazing coffee at home, just by a few concepts. So buying coffee beans, freshness matters massively. Most coffee beans, they're roasted for after 3 days, and then 3 to 10 days, they are quite like yellow bananas. 3 days, they're like green bananas. You don't want to drink them. Then they come up 3 to 10 days, yellow bananas, and then they become black bananas, and you don't want them at all. After all, most of the stuff in the supermarkets, a year old. They're stale. They're really stale coffee. Most of the stuff that you're picking up on that. When they're ground, they're exposed. Their surface area is exposed, and they start picking up any of the flavors that are in the air, and they lose all their flavors. Like the apricot and walnuts and hazelnut, whatever that's characteristic. But it just goes, and you will not be able to pick that up, no matter how you try, because they're just vaporized. So freshness matters. So whatever your choice, just buy the freshest beans as possible. If you coming up and trying to get them in whole bean form and grinding them, that's really important. The grinder is actually probably more important than actually your brew method. And doing that, and if you're really into coffees, buy a grinder is far more important than any machine that we did. Most of my investment downstairs is on grinders. It takes a lot of engineering to make every single particle exactly the same size. on something that's so variable the size of a coffee bean. So if you really do like your coffee, have a grinder, and then don't worry, and any brew method doesn't really matter. So then there's kind of like talking really quickly on the brew methods. How many people do French press? You guys like French press?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good because you use a coarse grind on it, and it leaves the oil inside the coffee bean, so you get a really nice melt texture. But the very bottom of the cup, sludgy. The big solution, don't drink it. A filter drips, how many people do filters? Paper filters, yeah? Yeah, that's really nice. You get a really clean cup, but it strips out the oil, so your mouth texture is not so great. But you get a lot more of the, you can potentially get a lot more natural flavors and aromas out of it. That's quite good. Anyone seen the AeroPress? Yeah, a couple of people going, that makes a wicked strong cup of coffee. It's kind of a hybrid between a French press and an espresso machine. And so instead of just using gravity like a pour over does, it actually puts not a huge amount, it's only about 2 atmosphere of pressure through the coffee, and it's able to really get great extraction on it. So, those are like the 3 major ways that I kind of suggest exploring coffee. For downstairs, we're using the V60 pour-overs. You see the guys making them by hand. And that gets an extremely clean cup of coffee that you could able to taste the aromas and the flavors really quite easily out of those. My weapon of choice is a French press just because of the texture. I really like it, and it's probably skill-wise the easiest to do. Alright, so then there's a couple of things that we need to do to be able to balance, make the coffee. You have your fresh beans, and then you have your grind. We'll talk about grind in 2 seconds. But we always look at the strength of the coffee, and when we talk about strength of the coffee, that's the same thing as putting squash in your glass, and how much squash you put in it. If you put too much in, the squash will become astringent, drying your mouth, and you put too little in, it's just watery. So how much of coffee you put into your recipe, you'll get watery or way too much body, and if it's too much, you'll start adding milk. So that's a good indication, is if more milk comes in, it's coming too strong for your palate. Simple as that. The other one is extraction. If you're getting good extraction or poor extraction. If you're getting really poor extraction, it'll taste sour, earthy, grassy kind of notes into it. And if it's too creative extraction, you're getting bitterness. It's leaching out too much of the toxins in the coffee. So either when you're drinking it, your cup of coffee, you can either taste, if you can taste simultaneously like sour notes and bitterness, you probably got a really good extraction. The coffee's just not very good. But then you can't really improve it. You can't get rid of it. You're right in the thing in the middle of it. And a really amazing cup of coffee comes up that the bitterness and the sour notes will just completely disappear. So how do you correct it? It's really simple. You can do, if you have your own grinder, if it's too sour, you need to go to a finer grind on the grinder. People have grinders here. Anyone have any grinders? One.
It's probably very cheap.
It doesn't matter. Any grinder is better than any nothing, because I always argue about the grinders. So important, because right when you grind it, the aromas and flavors go. 50% of the aromas and flavors go within the first 15 minutes. So if it's ground, it's stale. The standards downstairs, if they grind it and they leave it for 30 seconds, it goes in the bin. It's, what is it, Asda? They grind it, they put it in a bag and put a shelf life for a year. And it just goes so fast. So grinders are so important. But you know, it's fine. If you have, anyways, if you have carry on for this, even though no one has a grinder, this is so important. Yeah, if it's what you call it, the ground, if it's sour, you need the the ground is too coarse, and you just go to something finer. And if it's too fine, you'll get bitterness, and then you move it over to make it a little bit more coarser. And anytime you're messing around with your recipe at home, you just make one simple change. If you make multiple changes at once, you change the amount of dosage or the water temperature or the grind or anything like that, you'll get confused and you won't know which way forward and things like that. Just use scientific methodology, one little change at a time, and small little improvements will generally just improve your cup of coffee that you're able to make at your house. And yeah, and then hopefully we'll get something balanced. That we're somewhere in between bitter and sourness. You know, take any of these sort of suggestions and things like that. Just one little tweak and it should make a noticeable difference. I know downstairs on the espresso machine, if we're 26 seconds or 27 seconds, 28 seconds on a pour, completely different fish from just minor little adjustments. And yeah, you guys could just come up and just work out your little recipe and you'll get a much better, cleaner. Okay. Hope that helps. Any questions? Go.
You briefly mentioned water temperature.
Yeah, water temperature is important. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any rule of thumb that
Yeah.
I tend to cut the kettle off just before it boils, but
Yeah, that's better. If you're doing, it's like you had a French press or something you're pouring over. Generally, if you boil the kettle, we pour at about 90 degrees. It's boiling at 100. We pour it at 90. We want the end cup at 85 degrees. That's for specialty coffee. Some people will find that a little bit lukewarm, but it doesn't hurt the beans at all. It's the same with tea. You know, some of the teas are coming at like 80 degrees, quite cold. So water temperature has a lot of effect on it. But the lower the water temperature, the poorer the extraction is, and the more chance you're going to get sour notes. Yeah. But if you have that capacity to play with water temperature, like leaving your kettle on for a side for a minute, that you should find some improvement, especially if there's bitterness.
yeah.
Yeah. Go.
Right, you know with wines,
Yeah.
excuse me, I've got a cold. You know with wines from a single estate,
Yes.
that basically from vintage to vintage, they can taste quite considerably different. Do you get the same effect with coffee because of the conditions in which to actually grow?
Absolutely, it depends on the year. They seem to be going in about 3 or 4 year cycles. I saw a graph of this on specialty coffees. The specialty coffees that are in a sustainable business model, variations each year is actually relatively tight. So I'm comfortable like setting a contract with that because they're able to perform on that.
Because of the skill of the grower?
Yeah, exactly. But when we're looking at unsustainable estate business models and then coming up, what we're finding is that they make a lot of profit 1 year, and the next 9 years they make nothing, or less than nothing, and they end up closing shop, and it's not sustainable because they cannot produce the quality. The quality came from that season.
Do they also have an issue with yield as well? It's trying to harvest too much in 1 year as well. So, for example, with the wine, if you have high yields, you usually have a lower quality wine.
Yes, exactly.
It's the same
That's always measured in like hectares and things like that. How many gallons of wine do you get per hectare and things like that. But in the coffee industry, it's a little bit different in that all coffee finds a home. And then it all finds a home. I mean, it's the same in this. I mean, you'll get some rubbish grapes, and they'll still find a home for them. They won't go into the reserve bottles or anything like that. But they will not pass the quality checks that they have for making a specialty grade coffee. You know, because I only mess with the stuff that's around the top 8% of the best beans in the world, and I normally buy the best 3%, because they get me really excited, and that's the only thing.
But do they actually restrict? Just curiously, do they actually restrict their yield to get better coffee? In other words, is all the energy goes into that?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely, because I'm just thinking most of like, this Nicaraguan that I'm just working at the moment, it's not restricted. That's what they have is one, I'm negotiating one contract at the moment that they make 14 bags a year. So 70 kilos a bag, that's it. That's what they live off of. So, you know, and they go out every single night, pick by hand, fill up their bag, and they send it to the mill, and theirs is put onto a little side, and that's the type of coffee that I buy. So, you know, it's just a little family that does, you know, an amazing job. So, yeah, they're not into mass production or anything like that. So I don't think they're restricted, I just think that's their capacity is,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Really horticulturalists. Hi.
My colleagues are rubbish at making cups of tea.
Oh, yeah.
Have you got any tea making advice you could give me?
Yeah, it's generally way. What's the problem with it?
Well,
How is it tasting?
I made it.
normally it's a white colour, so I think that's quite bad to start with. So there isn't really.
If it's a white tea, it's alright.
Alright. There isn't much of a tea. I think it's all to do with the way they leave it in London.
Yeah, so each difference is you're balancing on. If it's white and it's supposed to be an English breakfast, that's a warning sign. It's a black tea, and it should come out something like that where you don't want to leave it to a point where it's starting to become stewed and drying in the mouth or something like that. It should still be a refreshing drink. So either time will improve that. English breakfast specifically could take a higher temperature than normally. So boil the kettle, leave it for a minute, pour it in about 3.5, 4 minutes, and normally that should be okay. If you're doing 30 seconds, you have issues. But I actually tend to drink my tea, like I just blanch the bag in for like not even 30 seconds. I just hit it a couple times, but I always have to keep my palate really clean, so I'm tasting all day long.
So I like the 3 to 4 minute, but my colleague, well, he likes a little dunk and then that's it. I don't understand that.
No, just leave each tea bag, you store it, you know. Yeah, so leave it, 3 to 4 minutes. If it starts getting dry in your tongue, you've gone too far, you know, or increase the temperature. Time and temperature.
It's a compulture problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long did it take you to actually make the perfect cup of coffee? First one?
I made the first one 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I got a new Sumatran, and I really like Sumatran coffee. And when I was first roasting for it, I couldn't bring it to the color that was called a San Francisco blend. It's really close to like a Italian or Italian roast, and this is what we drink daily in San Francisco. And I couldn't bring it. It started getting really bittery and really smoky, and then I picked up this new Sumatran. And I treated it in the roaster as nasty as I could possibly do. I would just beat it up, and came out, and it was dead beautiful. And there's a rule that here, if I take 3 sips, my staff get really excited. They have 3 sips of their coffee, and they'll be jumping down. If they're like, 4 sips, they'll like faint. I made this, and I made myself a cup of coffee. 3 cups in a row. I was completely wired because I drink maybe a cup of coffee like once a week at maximum, and I had 3 straight in a row. I was so excited. So yeah, I haven't had that good of a coffee for probably about 20 years. That's the Sumatran, by the way. The pour over. It's really great. Anything else?
Had you thought about actually doing equivalent to what I do for a cocktail making night, a coffee making night?
Yeah, we were running a coffee club on Wednesday nights, and I stopped it because I was chefing in the kitchen, and I just was knackered. I I don't have to chef very much now. The chefs are pulling their weight, so I don't have to worry about that. So I'm actually playing around more with wine and more with coffee nowadays. And yeah, I'm on the kitchen doing more stuff like that. So that's quite. So yeah, we will start it up soon. Because not only, but the baristas are actually getting skilled up, and they're actually outperforming me, which they should because they're on the machine 40 hours a week, and I just pop in, and they're just like, how do you do it? But they're getting good and they're very knowledgeable. So we'll start doing it soon. It's actually a really fun night. Normally about 10 people show up and we just master the recipes on various machines, and we even roasted some last time. Those were good fun. Yeah. Anything else?
Will you do a tea talk next time?
I'll get Lucy. Lucy's much more passionate about tea. But yeah, we could do tea next time.
You're not passionate about tea like you are coffee, though.
I drink tea. I'm passionate about coffee because coffee has a complexity and intensity that tea doesn't lack. Thank you for everyone for coming.